everyone. Welcome back to my channel of Spiritual Conversations. I have a guest here. Her name is Nancy Jean from Nancy Jean's Garden. She also has a YouTube channel that you can definitely check out. I'll put all of her information down below in the chat. So today we have picked, or she has picked, a spiritual journey. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the spiritual awakening and or a spiritual journey, whichever way you want to look at it. Here is a website that I retrieved a lot of our information off of, which is called chopra.com. And the 5 stages of spiritual awakening. While a spiritual awakening is often considered a journey, it's not necessarily a journey of physical travel or pilgrimage. It's a process of going beyond your boundaries and taking the next evolutionary step. Pause to read. Escaping ignorance. Pause to read. The vision of our spiritual journey. Number 1, glimpsing. Number 2, close examination. Number 3, seeking. Number 4, loss of sight. And 5, seeing. And this is remarkable because she's been doing this for so long. As I always say with Nancy, she has probably forgotten more than I know, because she's been at it for so long. So I am going to shift it over to her. She's going to tell you what she does on her channel. And yeah, so go for it, honey.
Okay. On my channel, I try to look at all sorts of ways of dealing with the world spiritually, physically, things that are going on in the world. Currently, I'm doing a lot of work with earth energies, ley lines, elementals, which is fairies and spirits, and that element that's part of our world, and why vibrationally, as we're changing, we're seeing more and more about that part of the world and how it works. And I build grids, which Sheila has lovely. That green thing behind her on the wall is a grid. This is one a little closer up. And this was an outgrowth of my spiritual journey. And oops, this one. I always like to make sure right's up is up. This is a grid I built for the world, which is a little pretentious, right? But it was requested for me by a reader who works with energy lines. And as you can see, it's all different kinds of crystals. They're all placed very specifically for very specific vibrational reason, and they create different feelings. I also make chakra eggs for the throat and the heart, which are another meditative technique. It's a way you can tie your energy to something, and you have the wonderful heart chakra. And you can go to my website and see all this work. I also have a slideshow of I think there's about 120 of my grids that I built that are on there. And that's slideshow's a year old, so there's a lot more beyond that, but I just don't have them out here yet. I also channeled a divination technique called the garden. And you can go to my website and kind of see about the garden. If you watch my shows, you'll see me roll. You use crystals to roll in the gardens, and it's body, mind, spirit, grounding, and clarity. And where it hits in the garden tells you where you're going. And all of those are outgrowths of my just working with energy for so many years, so many ways. So that's kind of the world's fastest explanation of what I do. If you're interested in kind of seeing a whole spiritual path, starting on the 10th of March, if you go to my channel, if you go join my channel, then you'll always get notices, right? So watch the show, then hop on over to Nancy Jean's Garden. All you have to do is subscribe, and you can see what's going on. But starting the 10th of March, and Miss Sheila, I think, will be part of this. I haven't gotten her permission yet, but I'm going to be doing a thing I do called 9 Candles. And we're building up to the equinox on the 20th of March. This one is an extremely important equinox. It's not just that it's a very important day. It's not just that all of the ley lines and all the earth energy lines actually get straight on that day, which is something they've only found out in the last 10 years by having enough people watch them all over the world. But it's also about how we get straight and how we get redirectioned. And that has a whole lot to do with your personal journey, because my personal journey started when I was a wee wonka. I mean, tiny, tiny. I'd sit and I was, as a just out of being toddler, I'd be talking to people about zoos that I'd gone to that they'd gone to when they were younger, and we'd talk about it so enthusiastically, and I knew about all these things, and the people would come and tell my mother, when did you go to da 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 and go to that zoo? It's a marvelous zoo. And my mother would take me home and she'd spank me and she said, you've never been there. How could you have talked to this woman? I remember one woman was so incensed when she found out how angry my mother got. She came back and challenged her and said she could not have known what she knew unless she'd been there. And so my parents already kind of knew I was special. But when you're the absolute third child and 5 kids, your parents have gotten out time for special. Especially in the 1950s. It's all get in the car, I'll go in place. We're a family. And I was not really part of my family, but I knew from quite young that I was different. Then at 12, I just got handed a tarot deck and that all worked. At 17, I ran into a ghost in a hotel in London and I got removed from the hotel because not I didn't do anything wrong. They didn't want people in there that could trigger this ghost off. And people weren't supposed to be in the rooms where he was. It's a long story. If you watch me enough, you'll find out about that too. And that solidified for me. I'm weird, I'm different. So I went into Chicago to the Parapsychological Institute and lied about my age and said, I just want to find out how all this works. And they basically told me at 18 I could do whatever I wanted to with it. And I told them about the ghost. And they said, well, you don't have to accept all the powers you're given. You can choose. I'm doing this, I'm not doing that. So I didn't do much with mediumship. I never really have, because I because damn ghost tried to kill me, kids. Give it up. And so I just kind of went along and read tarot and worked psychic fairs and stuff. And there's periods in your life where you'll be very immersed in it. And then there's periods where you'll back off. Now, I don't know if this is going to continue to happen. I think if what I'm hearing is proper about how the energy is flowing into the world and how our DNA is actually changing from photonic energies. This is why I got into ley lines and energies. They start telling me that I'm getting hit by a lot of subatomic particles and it's changing my DNA. And I could look back and say, yeah, things started to change here. Things got faster. One of the things I've noticed is time is so different now than it was when I was younger. And it is and it isn't. But there were times where you could just get away from it. Even if you were psychic, you could kind of turn it off. I used to be able to kind of turn it off. That doesn't happen much anymore. And I don't think people who are emerging, and I'm working with people at all different age levels when I mentor. And when I mentor with them, I'm finding that maybe they don't want to turn it off because it's, not going to cost them their job, or they're not going to be burned at the stake, which is another past life experience I had. But if you're emerging and you're beginning to understand your power, you just need to pick a discipline and work with it and see how it works with your power. That's what I tell people, whether it's remote viewing, which Sheila does a lot of, or reading cards, or throwing stones in my garden, or learning numerology, which I think is a great fun one, because you can do that one in your head. You don't need cards. You can walk around down the street going, oh, I know what happens in that house. It's true.
Those are fun. Numerology is fun.
Numerology is fun. But I know in my own personal journey, there was periods of time that I had to put it down. When I was pregnant, I couldn't waste the energy. I was building another life, and there's things that happen. And there's times when I had illness or things like that around me, so I couldn't deal with it. And so I've been told that I'm a teacher who's supposed to be here to help people during these times to understand what's happening to them. And last night, I have a friend, we'll call her Vicky. I had a very troubling family growing up, and I've kind of guided her through that, helped her go through some career changes, and she's just a marvelous young woman. Well, her mother popped up with cancer, and her mother was born outside the United States and never learned to speak English. So Vicky had to go home and be with her mother. And thank God she knew me. She had a father who wasn't doing anything to try and help the woman with her cancer. And Vicky would call me and say, I know I need to talk to you. And she'd tell me what the situation was. And I explained to her how to go to the hospital, get power of medical attorney so she could help her mother get out of here. Because she knew as it got to the end, her father was going to hold on to her, whether the mother wanted to be held on to or not. And last night, Vicky called and said, thank God you were there. I got the power of attorney. 48 hours later, I had to sit with the doctors and say, no, we're letting her go. The day they made the decision to let her mother go, her mother kind of sat up in bed and said, well, I would like this food. So she's ethnically Chinese. So she went and got the very favorite of her mother's Chinese foods at the very best restaurant that you could find, brought it back. Her mother ate about half the meal, laid down in her bed and died. And she said, you told me to journal what I wanted to see my mother do. She said, I wanted to see her lucid one more time. And then I wanted to just let her go. So there's a whole lot to understanding your spiritual self, because there's a part of our old spiritual self that says, I want to hang on to everyone I can. And yet there's times that people need to be let go. And I'm hoping you're not going to get to know me so you can watch your mother die. But I'm hoping that with the kind of life experiences I have, I can help people get through their lives more easily and more fully and more totally connected. Because most of my life, I really felt like even though I knew how to do this stuff, I could connect, I could see, I was alone. That, at the end of the day, when the lights went out, there was nobody but me there. And it was a very scary thing. I'd lived with it my whole life. And about a year ago, I was sitting in my chair one day going over how my life had laid out, had been doing some journaling and some other things. And all of a sudden, I got to see how we're all connected together and we're all one and we're singularity. And I think that's where more people are heading after this equinox, because it actually happened almost a year before the equinox. And when you can see and understand how we are all one, how we are all connected, and you can really, I know people talk about, oh, but I felt it completely in my heart, and I used to roll my eyes. Well, I did feel it completely in my heart, and you can roll your eyes all you want. It happens. And if you can open yourself up enough to understand that, you can have a kind of freedom because you're not alone. And I could have been, actually, was one time, I was in a field in Washington, D.C., watching Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart with 100,000 people. And it so overwhelmed my system that I had to be taken out of there in an ambulance. And I think it's because I couldn't believe I was in a sea of humanity that was so completely directed that way. I think I could go into that crowd now and be fine.
Right.
So for your own health and happiness, you need to kind of listen to the synchronicities of the world around you.
So what you got was a glimpse when you were a child, right? A glimpse
Right.
of what your spirituality in that world was
Mm-hmm.
really existing, which is a lot of people's experience. And so you have that one choice. We have free will, and it talks about that you either go that way or you don't. Well, you've chosen that way, so now you have to choose a path. And you chose this one. You could do all of them, and I always say that I think everybody could do about anything that we all do. But if you want to pick and choose, that's fine as well. Go and hone in on your craft on that way, and then seeking that path, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go into you not necessarily have to be educated, because I think a lot of times the more education we have in here, we lose our empathic ways, or we lose our intuitiveness, because we're
Mm-hmm.
up here instead of in here, where we need to be here inside and connecting with spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
removing all of the so much information out there. There's so much information out there, and a lot of people's opinions, and I kind of go, all right, that's enough, right? And seeking that and following that path as well. So now we're kind of at losing sight. So what times did you go, where's spirit? What's going on? Have I Am I not supposed to be doing this? Am I off kilter? That stress, that angst that
Okay,
kind of comes around.
right. Probably the worst period of my life was I was in a 2.5 year child custody suit. And in the end, the kids, my oldest son went to Guam and lived with his dad. My daughter stayed with me, and I had a third child, and she sort of became auntie to him because she was 14 at the time. She went into court and said, enough of this bullshit of these lawyers. I want to live with my mother. And in Texas, at 14, you don't really say that in the courtroom, but you do go to a judge and say, I want to go this direction. And the court, for the most part, unless they feel a child's truly endangered. And both of my grown children that are in their 40s now said to me right after this whole thing had happened, they said, I wish Dad loved us half as much as he hates you. His whole movement was based out of hate. And I was like, why in the hell am I caught in this? And then sort of, why in the hell did I pick him? So I did look at it kicked a lot of the ego-based stuff I carried around. If you're a good person, always good things are going to happen to you. No, it's not true either. But the thing is, the problem we have with it is when you get on that judgment card and we say we have to judge good or bad. Obviously, some things people do are clearly bad, if morally bad and ethically bad. But in your own life, I learned and met so many people I wouldn't have learned and met from during that time. I met a reader that person that was very intuitive, was helping me through that period of time. And ultimately, it ended up, she was just reenacting something that had happened in her life, and she was kind of manipulating me. So I learned about the power of when someone says, oh, but you have gift and you have sight, help me. When people want to surrender themselves to me, I'm like, no, you don't, because you have to live your path and I can't live my path through you. So I learned about why you don't over counsel people, or why you rein your own elements in. What you do is you try to guide people to their own reality.
Correct.
Um,
I agree with that. When we give readings, I am a firm believer. This is what Spirit says. Do with it what you will. I am
mhm,
not, this. I am not here to fix your problems and all of things of life. This is just information for you. Now, this is where we merged, right? You go through all of the chaos and
right.
just a whole bunch of stuff going around. You're going, what has happened? What is going on? And then all of a sudden, on the other side of it, the merge of understanding why this energy was here, we're not immune to
Mhm,
the life situations that we have out there. The only thing I think that we kind of gain a perspective is we have perspective, and
mhm,
we understand that just because that was the worst day of my life doesn't mean I was not protected, right?
right.
The merge of the that vision, that sight beyond sight, we finally
Mhm,
understanding, so we don't have to drink the rest of our lives because of it, or be miserable for the rest of our lives because of it. We don't have to use any of those earthly tools just to get through life anymore.
mhm,
And I think that's where the merge comes back in, is like we're okay exactly the way we are, and we have an understanding, and understanding definitely creates a life path of this work that we do in this metaphysical life. So
But
I think that's, talk about the merge.
okay, the merge for me came when I was not quite 65 and I had to have both my knees replaced. And I had dropped out of politics because how bad is it if you run walking programs and you can't walk, right? I mean, not a good example. And so I didn't know what I was going to do next. I knew I wasn't going to go back into politics. And 2 days before I was to have my surgery, a friend wanted to meet with me in a wine bar, and she said, "No offense, but you're going into major surgery, and I want to have you read my cards one last time." I'm like, "Oh, thank you for that vote of confidence." So we
Just
went
in
to,
case.
yeah, yeah, just in case. So we went to a place called Times 10 here in Dallas, and I was reading her cards at a table, and the owner of Times 10, who I know really well, Robbie, came up. He goes, "Do you want to do some readings tonight?" And I said, yeah, I guess so. Why? And he said, there's two or three people sitting at the bar. They see you reading cards. They want you to read. And I said, okay, fine, I'll read them. And he said, you charging him? You're charging him $25 a reading. And I'm looking around going, I am. And so I ended up walking out of there with more money than I walked in with. And Rob following me out the door saying, as soon as your surgery is over, call me and we'll figure out what night's best for you to come and read here. And I'm going, I said, Rob, I don't know. There's a lot of theories energetically about if you cut your body in pieces that it disrupts your energy. I said, I don't know if we'd be able to read. He said, you'll be able to read. Don't worry about it. And so I went and had my surgery, and his times 10 is near where the hospital I was in. He sent people up from the place saying, do you need us to go get you something? Is there anything you need? Blah, blah, blah. Because the only person I had to help me was one friend and my daughter worked 25 miles from the hospital. And anyway, when I got out of the hospital, he called me up and he said, well, we kind of evaluated Tuesday's really the best night if you want to come work on Tuesday. Like, what else am I doing? Except
Right.
trying to learn how to walk again. So as soon as I was off the painkillers, you don't read when you're taking painkillers and you don't read when you're drunk. Uh, as soon as I was off the painkillers, I got a cab and went over, and this before Uber and Lyft guys, long time ago. Uh, and I went over, and then my daughter picked me up, and I worked that Tuesday night, and I was there every Tuesday night except 3 until COVID hit, until the month before COVID hit, because my guides pulled me out of the world and said, you can't go out. There's something's coming, and if you breathe it, it'll kill you. And so I quit on the middle of February, about February 3 years ago. On my way home, my spirit guides told me that was lovely being at times 10, but you're going home now. And I'm like, I know I'm going home. Take the gray mist off my windshield. And they said, I said, what is that? And they said, if you breathe it, you'll die. You're going home, and we'll let you know when you can go out again. And I didn't go back out into really fresh air outside until late May that year.
Right.
And they were right. I had a compromising lung disease, and I had 3 of my doctors send me emails saying, this stuff's deadly to you. Really lock yourself up in a box. So I did. But that's how I ended up being on YouTube and learning Zoom and all that stuff. So I met Sheila. But so you got to listen for the signs and signals. And the sign and signal to me could have been, I could have said, oh, I'm a little old lady. My legs don't work. I've been cut up by surgeons. I'm never going to move again. I can't go out and do this. And talk myself out of the opportunity to have worked at times 10. Instead, I let myself go with the flow, started working there, then started working at a vintage shop that needed a reader. And that's what I was doing for 4 or 5 years before COVID, and having a wonderful time. And I was pretty much a certified full service reader. And then after COVID hit and I got on YouTube, I'd already been building crystal grids, then I started working with that stuff. And then I have so much time because I'm not sitting in traffic. If you live anywhere near Dallas, you know what I mean. You're always sitting in traffic. If you live in Dallas, I have so much more time to blow. And that's whenever it all merged together and it all became one. And then, like I told you a year ago, I really saw how all of the energy merges together. And all I can tell anyone is keep working at it. And I've talked to several other people that went through that kind of awakening, for their complete awakening of their understanding of the universe. Because you don't have to have an NDE. You don't have to get, hit by a truck or anything to get this. You can just do it by just opening your heart up, and the universe will come find you, and it'll loop you in when you need to be there. And that's why I'm so excited about what's coming up, because I think a lot more people are going to be joining that crowd. That I used to, even a year ago, I didn't talk about that ultimate understanding and joining together, but now I will, because I think there's going to be a whole lot more of you coming along.
Thanks everyone for joining me. I hope to see you in the next one.